Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today's guest is going to be sharing with us about her culture and actually how she is transforming women in her culture. And I'm really excited to share her here with you. Jeanny Chai is here. Welcome to Leaders of Transformation. We're excited that you're here.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. It's great to be here.
Well, we also want to give a shout out to Ashwin Krishnan because he is the one that actually introduced us. And I love this podcasting life because I get to meet the coolest people. You and I wouldn't be having this conversation if I did not have a podcast. I wouldn't have met Ashwin. I wouldn't have met you. I would have met so many other people. And so I'm so grateful for that. And when he said that you were somebody that needed to be on this show and we started to talk, oh my gosh, I was like, we need to get you on this show right away because, your message is so important. And I so appreciate it. So let's give the listeners, I'll give them a little bit of background on you and we'll dive in. So Jeanny is the founder of BambooMyth.com, and she is the author of the upcoming book, Out of the Bamboo Jungle, Daughter of TigerMom Triumphs Over Midlife Personal Shame to Achieve Authentic Success. She helps women to acknowledge the cultural experiences unique to the Asian American community and how these experiences uniquely influence their career, leadership, and how they show up as professionals in the marketplace. Maybe Jeanny, you can share a little bit more about your, expand on your background, but what I will share is that she has a BS in biology from Stanford University. And I love this part of her bio. After shaming her family by not attending med school, she spent over a decade raising a family. She has homeschooled her oldest child, who now attends UC Berkeley. And in her work life, she became known as a successful business development professional, coveted by CEOs for her ability to launch brand new sales initiatives at early stage tech startups. So she has been involved in tech in the Silicon Valley for a number of years, been very successful there. She is also a breast cancer survivor and has overcome great struggles with her health and with her family. She is reframed and continues to reframe these cultural norms of her past and is now leveraging them to create more meaningful and authentic journey on the road of success for herself and for others. So Jeanny, as I said, I think this is a topic that really needs to be addressed. And it's something that I personally can't speak to because I'm not involved in your culture, but I see it. I have a lot of friends of mine that are Asian American. And actually this conversation, as you and I were talking about, this conversation has come up quite a bit even recently in some of the trainings that I've been in. So tell us a little bit about this journey. You talked about recreating norms. Like, of course, obviously, we've got to start off with, for those people that may not be familiar with the cultural standards or expectations, can you give us a little bit of an idea of your culture, what your experience is growing up, and then what you chose to transform out of that?
Sure, Nicole. So I will start a little bit back to give some background. I was born not in the United States, in Taiwan. I came here when I was 3.5, and my parents were, of course, raised and born in Taiwan. So they have a very, I would say, East Asian cultural Confucius kind of background. And when you're a little kid and you get your upbringing and your parents teach you things, you never think anything different. You just think that's the way everybody is. That's the way we all live. And it isn't until maybe your 30s, maybe your 40s, where you start to realize there's a different way to live. And the way I'm living is really stressful. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I use the word stressful to as an umbrella word for all kinds of things. What I'm talking about is a shame-based, achievement-oriented, excel at all cost, kind of an authoritarian parental structure where you don't make your own decisions, your feelings don't matter. And you feel that this is the hardest part, is in combination with not feeling loved unless you achieve, and feeling very afraid of failure. For us, failure was getting a B. And that sounds so ridiculous, but it's true. We're all afraid. And so you live in constant fear of, if I fail, will I be loved? And you don't realize this again until, you go through some therapy, read some books, or meet awesome people who have gone through that journey. but there's a lot of stress and buildup. And so now that we are, my cohorts are in our 40s now, we're all talking about this, and we're very unsatisfied because we look good on the outside, right? We've got the titles, financially, we're probably all doing pretty well. We've been to colleges that are pretty top notch, but there's this feeling still of not being good enough that rules over everything we do. There's a constant fear of what if I can't achieve more? And that is something I started to see a few years back, especially when my life started to fall apart and I was going through a difficult time. I'll go into more detail. And then the cancer gave me a lot of space and time to evaluate these things. And I came out a different person. And once I realized that, I said, I've got to share this message, because there's so many of us who really don't know what we don't know. We think this is normal. We think self-doubt, rejection, fear, anxiety is normal, and it is not. And it can kill you, as I learned when I got breast cancer. So that is the journey that I'm on, to, in love and in kindness, to do something that, whether I have 2 years left to live or 10, I want to not sell software. I love selling software, but I want to address women who are in pain, who are where I was 5 years ago.
Well, you mentioned about people thinking that it is normal to be that way. I think it's common. It's certainly common, but it's not necessarily like, what is the normal? We, define normal, right? What is normal? Is it okay? When you said there about not feeling enough, I think that's common to all of us in some form, or whether what culture we come from, where we live in the world. It seems to show up differently. Or it stems from different reasons why we feel not enough. In your culture, maybe it's because of like you indicated, it's because of the performance, right? Other cultures, it might be something different, but I just hear this commonality, and, and we all have that, like, oh, am I enough? Am I good enough to be? And what you said there was so powerful is, am I good enough to be loved? And that is, like you talked about stress. I mean, you get to the point where you can strive, and I've done that, where you strive long and hard. You get to this point where something happens. It's like life gives us this opportunity to see that, maybe to question that. I know for me, it was when I had a situation with my husband, and he just decided he didn't want to be with me anymore, and he rejected me. And all of a sudden, all of that confidence, that what I realized was a facade, all that I thought I had built, this armor, this strength around me saying, yeah, and because I realized it was armor later, I just thought it was confidence, but it turned out that it wasn't real, because it fell crumbling apart at that moment when I realized, oh, maybe I'm not enough. That fear of not being enough actually was what drove me to be successful. And it wasn't that my parents gave me an expectation of being successful and going and getting, going to university, because I didn't go to university. But it's a common theme. In your culture, you talk about the shame. Can you speak a little bit more about that? And it's pretty insidious, the way that it impacts people's lives.
It is, and it's not spoken. You'll never hear parents teaching you and saying, we're ashamed of you, but it's the actions, it's the mindset, you're here to make our family look good. You're here to make our culture look good. And so even if you go into Chinese restaurants and you observe this sometimes, there's a kid who's misbehaving. How is that parent treating that child? They're saying, you might hear in Chinese, "Dulian, you're embarrassing us, stop." And so repeated, repetitions of that somehow make you feel like, oh, I can't do anything wrong. And if I do, it's not just the action that's wrong, but now my parents are upset. Right? Something's wrong with me. Right. And that insidious thing just kind of grows up with you as an adult, and you never really quite understand that till you're a people approval addict. And then you trace that back many years, many levels, and you go, oh, it's shame. I don't like myself when I fail. I'm embarrassed to even be here, and that's different than making a mistake and feeling bad. It's like your whole being is not worthy. And that is a different issue. So I do want to point out, when you said about success, I totally believe in success, achievement, potential, doing stuff that you are good at. And I'm doing that now, but it's in a different mindset. It's like, I get to do this. This is so exciting. It's not, I've got to be a doctor or I'm going to be disowned. That's a completely different mindset. And
Yeah.
so you alone can figure out which one are you, and if you know you're not the one that's got passion and excitement and joy, that's an indicator that something in you, could be better.
Yeah, it's coming from a place of fear, the fear of loss, the fear of loss of face, loss of
Right.
love, not being accepted versus love. And I believe that we're only ever coming from either love or fear. All the
Correct.
emotions stem from one or the other of those. And when you're coming from love, like you said, it's like, I want to do this. I want to be successful, but it's not to prove myself. It's not to be okay or to feel like I'm enough now based on that. And it's because I mean, success comes and goes, right? I mean, you can be successful or you can be healthy, right? It's like women who define themselves by their looks. Well, something happens now, all of a sudden they don't have that to rely on. What do you have left? It's amazing. Like, I've met so many successful people, and it's a gift in a way to be successful when you're young, to right out of the gate create a lot of success in business. But I've also seen a lot of the people that have done that, that they've actually created their identity around, like they're defined themselves by that. And when that success, as businesses come and go, and sometimes we're more successful than others, we take hits, we have failures in life, we all do, we make mistakes. Then what I noticed is that when they fell from grace in that, it was really in their own mind. Like they started to break down personally. They took it personally as an indication of who they were as a person, and they fell apart. And it's heartbreaking. So what you're teaching women now, well, you tell us, like, what are you teaching women now that is freeing them? How are you freeing them from those constraints?
Right.
So that they can actually enjoy their life and be happy. And we're talking specifically about Asian American women who come from this shame-based background.
I think storytelling really connects. You can write out bullet points, say you need to change, be happy, speak out, be confident. And that's so hard to just read that and go, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
So through storytelling, and I do this whenever I can, I tell the story of my breast cancer journey and what a shock that was. So I'll give you a bit of a snippet of that. Is when I've been living like this, looking for outside approval in my marriage. I did it in my job, even with my children. I would cook special meals for them, and I'd wait for that thank you. And all this time, there was a lot of pressure. You don't know it, but there was a lot of pressure to keep going. And one day back 4 or 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. And I never expected that. I have a whole line of aunts and grandmas who've never had it. Diabetes, I expected, not that. And so it wasn't genetic. And the oncologist did some work on me and said, you have not one, but 3 tumors. And that usually is the case where your immune system has shut down, and which means something in your life is causing your immune system to shut down. And I'm like, I know what that is. It's the constant people approval, the disappointment. And at that time, my marriage was falling apart, and there was a lot of shame for me. I was saying I'm a bad wife. I didn't go to med school. I'm a bad mom. All these things that may or may not have been true, but I was believing it, and I was at a very low point in my life. And that's, coincidentally when the 3 tumors showed up. So then she said to me, if you do the chemo, we can cure what's there now, but unless you figure out a way to live, knowing your value and not being sorry and apologetic, it's going to come back because your immune system will not recover. And so now I went home, being stressed that I was stressed out. So, and there was no more, it's not that bad. It is bad. It is very bad. And
that's great. And before you go further, what she said there, what a gift. I mean, in most doctors, I've heard of people going through being diagnosed with cancer. They don't get that kind of input.
Wow.
They just say, oh, well, here's what we can do to help it. But they don't. I mean, that was a gift that she gave you to say, hey, you need to do something more than what we're doing here to heal it, so that it doesn't come back. That's really powerful.
I've got one of the best oncologists here. And so I'm really grateful for her. I call her my savior. And so, the day that I got cancer was also a life-changing day, because up to that point, I was still trying to achieve, so maybe my marriage is falling apart, but I'm going to get the MBA. I'm working at startups, partly because I like them, partly because I want to IPO and be somebody, right? I'm waiting for something to happen so I can be the next Elon Musk. And you think that you don't say it out loud, but that's kind of the attitude. But
Right.
the day that I got the diagnosis, I tell you, Nicole, all I could think about was I want more time with my 5-year-old, and that was so clear to me that the MBA didn't matter. The title didn't matter. So what if the IPO never happens? I'm going to miss my children. And that
Yeah.
was, when you're Asian American, you don't rest very much. You're always going, you're studying, you're tutoring, you're this and that. College, there's no break. You work harder and harder. And then your job, you keep working. And so this is really the first break in my life where I was forced to stop and think about relationships versus achievement. And I thought that's a long time to go without thinking about the value of other things in life besides school and education and what kind of job and title you're going to have. But that's what the Asian, unfortunately, community values a lot. Oh, she went to Harvard, she's somebody. And so-and-so went to and we're compared to a lot, right? So that was the first time I realized, those values could be a bit off. And maybe I could do something about that. Because now I have a mind and I realize I want to see my children. And so that's the beginning of the next 3 years of journey and transformation that caused me to actually make deliberate choices. That's what I call leveraging your cultural norms. Take the parts you love. Yeah, the hardworking part, the drive, keep that. But what are you searching for? What are you working for? And is it fulfilling? And is it really, something that's going to matter in your heart? And you start to not ignore your emotions anymore and say, well, I have to be a doctor. I have to be an engineer. I have to be a lawyer. Do you really? If you love it, great. If you don't, there are other options.
So did you leave your career? Did you slowly transition? How did you transition in? Because now you're the founder of BambooMyth.com. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Right. So
transition.
There's a little bit more piece to the recovery from the cancer piece I'll share with you. And that is when, I was living alone. I was separated from my husband at this time. So I went through 16 months of treatment, chemo alone. And that was really rough. I got really tired of watching, Pretty Little Liars, every series I could have watched, because I was trying to avoid my emotional kind of state. You don't want to look into your stuff, even if you should. But towards the end, I had to, and there was a day when cancer was almost done, and I was looking forward to that, going, yay, no more, 26 medicines and all. And yet I realized that the emotional state I was in prior to cancer, which was the people approval, always needing to excel, that mental state was actually more difficult and painful than going through cancer. And I was saying, oh no, I wish I could just keep this state of fighting a physical illness, because the other one was much worse. And so when you have a point of comparison, that's what shocked me, is now I know, oh, this is really, really bad. And I didn't know, because that's all I've ever known. And so in my career at that time, I was still at a startup. What it gave me was confidence, because I said, if I'm going to live, these gifted years that are, I could have, if this happened probably 20 years ago, I wouldn't be here, because medicine for cancer has gotten so much better. It is amazing.
And are you in a full remission?
Oh my goodness. I believe so. I've got 2 more years, and then, I've got normal chances. So I don't even think about it. I just, one day at a time.
Yes.
But the thing is, if I'm going to live another 20 years, I don't want it to be like the past 20 years, because that was hell. And now that I've been through this, I know it's hell, because I was beating myself up in that rejection. That wasn't life. And so I decided I'm going to have more confidence. I'm going to speak out. I'm going to be me. I'm going to let go of all those incriminating messages that I used to send myself every day, because I thought it was normal. And that began to change the way I viewed myself. I began to get respect at work. I applied for jobs I wouldn't have ever applied to in a million years. And I had the confidence because I was coaching myself to not live a shame-based, achievement-oriented life. It was something different, something beautiful. And so I was in corporate for a year. And then, I had this message I was giving my children at this time, saying, do what you love. Do something that, you would do if you weren't afraid. So I did things like take up opera. I tried out for America's Got Talent, and then they're like, I know. And then, so they're doing things. And then eventually I said, am I going to be selling software? And that's when it hit me, like, if I weren't afraid, I would do something with people, because I'm a very connected kind of person. I love talking to folks. I talk to everybody at the company. And I began to think, what message is it, And the one thing that hit me during all that cancer treatment was, I am approved. I don't need more approval. I am approved. I've got things to offer. And so that's the message I want to bring, to women who haven't had the benefit, I think, of going through a life-changing, life-threatening, where you've got to change now. and show them there really is a possibility to change.
I love that. Wow. So today, so as you work with women, you do it through, you've got your book coming out.
Yes.
What are some of the other ways that you gather women together? How do you support them? Do you do one-on-one coaching?
I do. I can take 10 to 12 folks every three quarters or so. And I work with them individually because, the things that we do, Asian American culture, I want to point this out, when we want more recognition or we want more influences, we add a degree. We'll get a master's, we'll get an MBA, we'll get a PhD, or we'll take leadership classes. And a lot of that information is good, but we need more than information. We need transformation.
Amen.
And transformation happens when you actually practice what you know is true. And so if you know that you need confidence and need to speak on a 2-day workshop, you go home and you don't practice it, it's going to be the same thing 10 years from now. So what I do is I'll take you through very specific bite-sized, this week, I want you to recognize when you are apologizing unnecessarily, or this week, talk about think about your self-talk. When you make a mistake, what are you saying to yourself? And catching those things and gradually changing your mindset first. And once we get the mindset piece down, then we talk about specific skills, how to navigate in teams, how to manage people effectively, how to not be self-focused, but other-focused, those kinds of things. But we practice that in a 16-week section. So by the end, there's a transformation and a new you.
I love it. That's great. And it can be applied to anything because it's not just business and, and career and all of that. This is also for their personal life. It transforms all the areas of their life because you're transforming their being, how they're showing up. It's beautiful. So yeah, go ahead.
In my personal life, I found that too. I read so many self-help books. I've been through multiple hours of counseling. But what I realized I didn't do was every day, I didn't have the habit of applying any of that. And so when I began to do this, I saw a real change. What you say to yourself in the morning really matters. So that's what I hope to teach. Yeah.
Well, you are teaching it, and I love it. So we talked about the achievement trap that we often get tied into, shall I say, and trapped into, and how to free people from that. What about the competition? This whole issue. I remember we were talking about that. I made some notes here. When we talked about competition versus creativity, and we were both really passionate about that. Is going from this competitive, which is a scarcity mindset, right? And it's that not enough, fearing being not enough, that you have to, of course, compete with others, and then shifting to that creativity. Tell us a little bit what's your take on that?
Right. Living in Silicon Valley, we just had all the college letters go out, the college acceptance letters. And I cringe when I see all the stress that's around this time of year. Because, there's only 2 people who can get into such and such school. And I wasn't one of them. And so when you compete, there's always this feeling of I'm not good enough. Right. Yeah. And so we sort of learn this as children, even, who's going to be valedictorian, and the people who are academically praised, or you get labeled, I'm only a C student. And so any of those labels, I think, from competition-based labels, are very damaging to our own psyche, whether it's I have to keep achieving or I'm never going to make it. Both of those are equally negative. And so instead, what I homeschooled was I wanted my daughter to understand that she was valuable, that she had specific skills. And so she, as I homeschooled her, she's an amazing writer. She is hilarious when she writes, and she can write parodies of Three Little Pigs in, 2 minutes flat and make people laugh. I was talking to another woman, actually Carolyn Duffy, who you interviewed.
Oh, yes.
She writes amazingly. I go, that is a gift. That's not something you learned in school. That's not something that you can take a class for. It's just you. And I have another son who's an amazing leader and knows how to make his teammates feel loved. And he watches out for the people who are hurt. That's your thing. And so we spend so little time exploring and discovering what that is for you. But as a mother, the greatest joy for me was discovering that in each child. And it was so different. And it wasn't something I did. It's just inborn. And so what I hope to do with my clients is in the last segment of these classes is figure out, who are you? When you were a child, you were free. You were not shamed. You were not afraid to try different things. What is it about you that's unique? And when you find that, then you can create something that the world wants that is uniquely you, based on your experiences, your talent, your skill. And that can be in a corporate job. You could be an amazing leader, can be an amazing synthesizer where you see things and how to pull it all together that no one else can do. And what is that? Because then that's your gift, and you don't have to worry about competing with everybody else in the cubicle next to you because only one of you can be promoted. And I think that kind of mentality, the constant competition, really just brings people down.
Yeah, absolutely. And we often will compare our weaknesses to other people's strengths. I don't know if
Absolutely.
yeah. And my coaching as well is based on strengths and helping people to play to their strengths. And what I found is interesting in that, and I'd love to hear your take on it. A lot of times people don't know what their genius is. They know what they're good at. And they've been striving, and working hard to be good enough, so they know what they're good at, but they don't know that genius because the genius is so ingrained, so automatic, that it's hard for them to see it right off the bat. And has that been your experience? And maybe like that, and maybe you can talk about for people who are listening and saying, I have no idea what my strengths are. I don't know what that genius is. I know I'm good at a lot of things, and I know that I get paid to do X, Y, and Z. But how do you find that special, unique skill and ability? Sometimes it shows up as in writing, or, certainly living in Southern California, lots of people are artists of some form or other, but, or Silicon Valley, really good with technology, but there's something underneath that drives it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. There is a segment in my program where I talk about values and about flow. And so we go back and explore and say, when were the last 3 times you remember in your life where you felt like this is it? I'm doing something I love. Time kind of stops. You don't remember if you ate lunch or not. And you're going on, and it's easy. There's no pressure. There's no, need to do something that I'm not good at. And once you explore those, you start to see patterns. And there's a way to look through that and discover, oh, this has been here all the time. And maybe I've been afraid because I've thought, I can't make money that way. For me, it's always been talking. When I'm doing public speaking, I've been training since I was 14. There's just this joy and an excitement. But you downplay that because you go, who's going to hire you to do that? So it's got to be something, that can be paid, like writing. So that's what I would do.
And so you were training at 14. What were you training on?
I had this amazing teacher, and I think you're lucky if you have 2 of these in your life, where they look at you and they say, I was extremely shy. I was the only Asian girl in the whole school of Caucasians, and people couldn't pronounce my name. So there's all kinds of reasons where I'd stand out, but they weren't good reasons. So I'd grown to be a very shy, unconfident freshman in high school. And we had public speaking in freshman English, and the teacher said, you are going to be an amazing speaker. And I said, all right. So we went up there, we did impromptu speaking, and I started great. Then I was so embarrassed, I sat down, but he invited me to join the speech team. And I said, you've got to be kidding. But, I wrote this thing, I practiced, I was terribly scared. But after 3-4 years of these, I was, thinking, I can do this. This is great. And the opportunities I've had since then have been motivational speaking for women. I've done international speaking in Mexico. I've taught public speaking at Stanford. None of them have been paid necessarily, but it's been my joy. I feel so excited when I do this. And people will say, wow, that meant a lot. I just had a conference I went to this past Sunday, and I spoke about my story a bit and, being authentic about how I was really down and decided, no, I can't live like this. And it touched a lot of people, and they came up and thanked me. And so when you do this thing, people will notice. And so that's another tip. What do people ask you for advice for? What do people come to you for? Maybe not so much in your career, but, in other parts of your life. And that gives you an idea of what it is that you are genius at.
It's funny because I've shared that with people, and then they say, yeah, but okay, that, and they want to make it more complicated, but it really isn't that complicated, and it's standing right in front of them. Interesting when you were saying about your speaking, where you would stand up, your teacher would encourage you to stand up, and then you would start off really well, and then you said, and then you kind of get nervous and people are watching you and what are they thinking, and then you shut down. How often do we do that, right? It's like that genius is always operating, but we tend to shut it down because we're afraid. We go out of the creativity into competition, comparison, and so forth. It reminds me of a story of of a young guy who is a guitarist, great guitarist. And he was asked in this group, I mean, there was a new class, and said, who here can play the guitar? And I said, well, I can play. And he said, are you good? And are you any good? And he said, yeah, I'm okay. But he had been playing for so many years, and everybody's like, okay, oh my gosh, right? Because it was a natural gift, but somehow he just felt like he needed to play small. Like somehow he was serving the world by, and serving other people in the class by playing small. And that never serves anybody. It doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve anybody else. And so when you're shining your light, then you actually give people the opportunity and the example of, and the possibility that they can do it as well. And so it's not this competition comparison thing. It's actually about, oh my gosh, imagine if we would all just play to our own strengths, what would happen? It's just amazing. So yeah.
One of the lessons I've learned, and this is the best thing that's happened to me, is there's always going to be, I think in every person, a child that's been wounded or is afraid of rejection, wants to prove. That's always going to be there. You're not going to be completely transformed and never feel that again. But what I found to be really helpful is there's another side of you, the badass, kick-ass woman in you that knows you've got something. And that's been silenced because in the Asian family, I wanted to sing and take lessons. No, what are you doing wasting your money? That's been silenced so much. She's just kind of standing there watching, but she's there. And so what I do in the transformation process is get that woman to start talking to the scared one and say, wait a minute, you are nervous because, you faced a lot of rejection, but we're going to go out there and kick some butt. So I'm going to give you a cookie and you sit and just watch me and watch what we can do. And I do that. It works because then you've got that, you're acknowledging those feelings, that little, oh my God, what if I just totally, screw this over and never show my face in public again? You have her sit, eat a cookie, and the other part of you is going to shine. And that works so well.
Oh, I love that. It's funny because I've had people say, because there was a time when that little girl was shut in a closet, so to speak, for a long time. She was put away for a long time. And people would say to me, coaches I was working with, they would say, okay, so what do you really want to do? As I was even reinventing myself. And I'm like, well, honestly, I just want to play. Like that's all that kept coming up is I just want to play. And here I am, this driven businesswoman, focused, results driven, and everything. The only thing that kept coming up is I just want to play. And I realized it's like, wow, I think she's been locked in a closet far too long, and she needs to come out and have fun because it's like this masculine and feminine energy. It's like, the drive and flow, the playfulness with the getting results. It's not like what you were saying earlier. You still want to be successful. You still want to achieve, but it's from a different place now. It's from a place of having fun, doing what you love. That's where when you love what you do, you never work another day in your life comes from. So yeah, I totally relate.
A phrase I keep hearing in the Asian community, and this breaks my heart, is everyone says, I feel like I'm living someone else's dream for my life. And we are very obedient to our parents. Unfortunately, that's a loving thing. And yet it can be a very demanding and difficult thing for yourself because you're still listening to their opinions at age 50, age 60, and they're disappointed in you and you feel the pain. And so my challenge is, what is it about? What is your dream? What would your dream be? And gently, still value your parents, still respect them, but you need to separate because this is your life, not theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we were talking about it separately that, I had prior to doing this interview, we were talking about some of the people that I have met, some of my friends and clients who have come from Asian American families who, absolutely, they have the control. Their parents are still just making decisions for them, and they're in their 40s and 50s. And and they just feel so constrained. And if they feel constrained, you can imagine what the next generation is going to feel like. Who's controlling, right? If they're not taking control and leading their own life, and their parents are doing that, well, who's going to teach their kids? What kind of example? And you just see how that can play out generation to generation. It can get very
exactly.
very
And,
toxic.
I've also, I used to have a very distinct public and personal life. Like on the outside, I looked successful. On the inside, I was crumbling. I was not confident. I was scared. And yet I think those two go together. And so if you're a 50-year-old and you're still letting your parents make decisions, what do you look like at work? What are you bringing to work? Are you able to be, a leader? Are you able to have those qualities, or are you still being the, I'll listen to someone else's opinions, above mine, and that kind of thing. And so what I do is try to bring those two together and say leadership starts with mindset. It starts with your personal life, gaining respect, showing others how to treat you, respecting yourself, really. And then that will flow into your career and all aspects of your life. And you'll be much happier as a result, much more fulfilled.
Now, you must get some pushback from people in the community for what you're teaching right now. Do you get people that say, oh, you know what, just don't break it. It's fine. It's been there. This is the way it's been done. Whenever you create a new norm, you're always going to get some level of resistance.
Absolutely. And, I look at, for instance, Amy Chua. Her book came out, The Battle Hymn of the TigerMom, and she got a lot of flack. And so I honestly, when I started this business, I had to go through that. I talked to people and they said, yeah, it's going to come. It's going to be heavy and it's going to be bad. But those are not the people that you are reaching out to. The ones who you reach, they will be helped. And so I'm going to expect that and go, that's all right, because there's a group that needs this and someone has to start that conversation.
Yeah. So what do you see as the vision going for the next 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years? Like where do you want it to go? What's the vision that you see, this transformation?
Right. I want this to be a topic of conversation in colleges, in homes, even in our education system, because really this trickles down to our children. And if we don't love ourselves, at least we care about our kids. And so I get a lot of comments. How do I raise a leader? How do I raise someone who's, living up to her or his potential? And I'm going to start with you, Mom, because what you model, unfortunately, I've learned this with my children, you model what your kids are going to pick up. Whatever you say doesn't really matter. It's what you do. And so there was some research recently that said millennials, really, even though they're growing up in America, they're born here, they're still acting like their parents were 3 generations ago. And so that says a lot about change. What I'd like to see is folks starting to realize that achievement is important, but valuing a child and teaching them autonomy, teaching them who they are is so important. And you do that by discovering that as a parent and then passing that on to your kids. And I see the change in my second 2 children because I've grown and they get the benefit of going, wow, life is exciting and fun. I love who I am. And I'm not going to, be a people approval addict, which I won't say about my older children, but I see, signs of that. And so it's really heartwarming to see that when you as a parent are healthy, that's the best thing for your children. So I want these conversations to happen all over the world. And for, everyone who feels like I'm not good enough and I'm the only one who feels like this, it's not true. The majority of us are feeling the same thing.
Well, and that's a great point, is they don't feel alone. Like I'm the only one who feels this way. It's my family that feels this way, or my circle. It's like you're not alone. Absolutely. And there is a solution to it. And you are paving the way for others to have the opportunity to make the changes in their life, because you're being that example, not only to your kids, but to others, other women, to say, oh, if she can do it, I can step up. And maybe they've been feeling like that for years, where they feel like they've wanted to step up, stand up to their parents, stand up to their culture and saying, no, this is who I am, but don't know how to do it, or be afraid of doing it standing alone. But here you are, you're creating a movement where they can stand together. And that's so powerful. So
it's a movement.
It is a movement, absolutely, and I sense that is extraordinary, and we're definitely going to support you with that. The Leaders of Transformation, and we have our community. I want to get this word out for people to encourage them, women that that you can serve. And you have your book coming out. When is it coming out, by the way?
I'm not certain yet. Probably end of the year, maybe longer.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's like, people set their deadlines for books be coming out, myself included. And, it's like a moving, I understand. You also you said you had a gift for our listeners, a webinar you're putting.
That's right. So you can go onto my website. It's called, as you said, www.bamboomyth.com. And it's going to have a webinar on there that's available for you that will give you more tips on, in an hour's time, what do I think to myself? What can I say in a room that will make me more confident, even if I don't feel it? Those kind of more practical tips. And then you can explore ways to start being someone new.
Fantastic. Well, we'll make sure that link is also available on the leadersoftransformation.com in the show notes, and we'll blast it out there, make sure that everybody's aware of that webinar. It's fantastic. Create awareness so that they can make different choices and have different actions coming from that. That's where transformation happens.
That's right. And one more thing, I forgot this, is I also speak at corporations. Usually in the area now, there's a talk about diversity, equality. And so if you are at a company where there's an ERG, which is an employee resource group for Asian Americans, I love to come and speak on leadership. A lot of these times it's about, community, eating food, but we need to talk about the leadership skills and get more conversations around that and why we're not good leaders, or if we are good leaders, why. And so those are things I like to bring to corporations, because that's where a lot of us exist, and the conversation can start.
Fantastic. Jeanny, thank you so very much for being here today and sharing your heart, your passion, your own personal experience, and your own transformation with us. And as you said, we first start leading ourselves and create the transformation for ourselves, and then we can make the impact and help other people transform. So thank you.
So much fun, Nicole. I can't wait to see what you're doing in your community and what all of us together will do. So this is fantastic. Thank you.
Yes. Amen. Amen. All right. Well, have a wonderful day. For those of you that are listening, my goodness, it's a flyby. That was for you, Jeanny. That was a flyby from Miramar here in sunny Southern California, San Diego.
I love
it. Oh my gosh. Well, for our listeners out there, we're glad you were here and hope you got some nuggets. And I encourage you, every time at the end of my podcast, I always say, you know what? Transformation requires action. You got to do something with the information. You can listen to podcasts all day long, but it's only when you actually take action, do something with it, that the transformation actually occurs. So take something that Jeanny has said here, whether you are an Asian American woman, a man, whoever you are, there are some really powerful nuggets here about, getting past the shame, getting past the not good enough conversation, and realizing that you have unique gifts, you have unique talents, you're here for a reason, and you have the ability to lead your own life. And I encourage you that and step out, be willing to stand out. Just as Jeanny's doing here, even maybe it's in your culture and you say, I'm going to stand for our culture. I'm going to create new norms and stand and say, hey, you know what? It's not acceptable the way that we've been living up till now. And for the next generation, it's important that we make the change now. Otherwise, we're leaving the problem to them to figure out. And that's not fair to do. It's, if there's a saying, if you spot it, you got it. If you see an issue, well, maybe that's the issue. Maybe that's the thing that you're meant to solve. So we encourage you to do that, and we look forward to hearing your stories. You can find us on Facebook. We're all over social media. You can also go to leaderstransformation.com. We'd love to hear your stories and what you're doing to make a difference in the world. And with that, we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon. We'll have another amazing guest creating transformation in the world as well. And just stay with us. And I really do believe that together, as we work together, we can actually make a greater impact in the world, truly transform the world. So with that, have a great day, and we'll see you soon.